Hello, everybody from the hackathon that's on YouTube. Thank you for joining. Keenan, should we start the recording to make sure this is recorded as well? Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Will Janish. I'm the Director of Data Providers at Chainlink. We have an exciting panel with us today of 5 different companies that all recently launched their own Oracle service on Chainlink. Each of these companies also has a prize in the hackathon for the best project that builds off of their data. So the goal of today's panel is to let each of these companies introduce themselves, describe their data, have us do a quick brainstorm about the use cases for the data, and hopefully set up the hackathon participants to be excited to build off of these applications and to have some good ideas of what they might want to build. We also, on the Chainlink side, have Patrick Collins. Patrick, maybe you could introduce yourself as well, and then we'll let the panelists introduce themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Patrick. Hopefully everybody who's watching is doing fantastic things for the hackathon. Really looking forward to everyone working and building really cool stuff. I know we actually did a very small data providers workshop. So this is kind of the extension of that, right? So we showed how to actually work with those data providers, how to actually, everybody here, everybody on this panel, how to work with their oracles and get data from their oracles. Now we're going to be going one step further, just as Will is saying, how do we, great, okay, now we can get this data. What do we want to do with this data? What crazy stuff can we do in DeFi with NFTs or any other markets or industries that we want to do? So yeah, and I'm Patrick, Chainlink developer advocate, excited to be here.
Awesome, thanks, Patrick. Great, so why don't we go down the list? I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Tell us who you are, tell us what your company is, tell us what your company does today, not limited to blockchain, but in general, and what kind of data you have as part of your company. Again, not limited to the Oracle service, but just in general. Why don't we start with Tiingo and Rishi Singh, the founder and CEO.
Hey everyone, thank you, Will and Patrick and Chainlink team. As Will said, I'm the CEO of Tiingo. Our company does a number of things. We're both a consumer and distributor of financial data. By that, I mean we both have an analytics platform that people use to help make better trading and risk decisions. We host games in which people who perform very well in portfolio simulations get interviews at top hedge funds and financial firms. And we also have an API side of the business, which is where our data oracle comes into place with Chainlink, in that we provide equity data, both intraday, end of day, Forex data, crypto data, and use data, some alternative data sets, and a variety of other data streams that various hedge funds, businesses, app developers, and sort of all people all over the web. Chances are, if you've used any sort of fintech app, you've probably come across our data. And we interface a lot of different quant funds. So if you've been on the institutional side, you've probably seen and played with our data.
Excellent, thanks, Rishi. Why don't we move on to Genesis Volatility and Greg Magadini, the co-founder and CEO.
Thanks, Will, appreciate it. Good job on a last name. It's a tough one. So I'm Greg Magadini. I'm the co-founder of Genesis Volatility. Genesis Volatility is a data analytics platform for crypto options. So basically what we look at is we look at implied volatilities, which are how the options markets are priced right now. We have tools to model realized volatility, which is the underlying volatility of the cryptocurrencies themselves, whether it's Bitcoin or Ether or Bitcoin Cash or any of the other cryptos. The main use case right now that's our off-chain use case is traders are using our platform to see how the derivative markets are priced, to contextualize that pricing to see if there's any sort of deviation from historical norms or any opportunities to trade some sort of inefficiency on crypto options. One of the use cases that we see for putting our data on chain via a Chainlink node is basically allowing a lot of the DeFi option projects to be able to price some of their pools in the case of Hedgehog, or at least reference some of the pricing on the CeFi world to have more efficient pricing in the DeFi world. And so that's basically our use case. Something that we've, our primary endpoint that we have live right now is looking at the skew between calls and puts. And so the way we think about that is that if calls are more expensive than puts, there's a positive skew. And if puts are more expensive, there's a negative skew.
Great, thanks, Greg. Why don't we move to the rundown and Gavin Wood, president.
Hi, thanks, Will. Nice to meet you, everyone. So the rundown is primarily about sports and sports data. We started out focusing on betting data, essentially collating real-time odds from a number of bookmakers, pre-match and live odds, but we've also moved recently into the scores element because there's quite a lot of demand for that, scores and results, as well as scheduling. There's a number of use cases for what we provide, from the lower level, which is simply displaying the data on an individual website. Next level up would be individuals or companies who are interested in grading betting events for whatever reason. So fantasy data. We've also had people who are starting to look into betting tracking applications. The level above that might be similar to what I've done historically, which is gambling. So professional sports gamblers need a source of real-time information in order to best ascertain where they should be placing their bet. So we provide that both via the API and via our UI. And the final use case is probably the higher end, which is bookmakers. So bookmakers are constantly looking to benchmark their odds against competition, so that they need to know what movements are happening so that they don't get caught, so that they don't lose money. So we will offer our information to bookmakers. Regarding Chainlink, it's a growing opportunity. Before we were introduced to Chainlink, we had a number of users coming to us looking for exactly this kind of information. So it was a relationship that was ready to blossom without having been introduced yet. We've started off with totals in a match, the total score, and we're looking for other opportunities such as the result, and hopefully to use what we consider to be our most important information, which is the real-time betting odds.
Great,
Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. And we're going to next turn through. We're going to get into a little bit more detail about the data that you're providing for each of you on the Oracle. So we don't need to cover that too much in this first pass. So let's go on to Watchsignals and Pham, CEO.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone from all over the world. I'm based in Asia. My company is Watchsignals. We are a Hong Kong company. We aggregate luxury watch data, and we make it into a comparison platform to help watch buyers to save time and navigate the landmark when they are looking to buy a watch. And so recently we diversify our business into a new stream, is to become a data provider. And we did a lot of research, and we found a very interesting opportunity to work with Chainlink. And so we apply, and with amazing support from Will and his team. So now our node is live. Basically for our data, we have historical price data for a lot of luxury watch models, or also like specifications of each model that you can use this data to predict prices used for watch appraisals. When you do, for example, financial product like insurance, or you can use it for NFT for like really rare and limited watch models. Also is data is the benchmark for collateral in DeFi products for certain luxury watch models. Also for synthetic assets like derivatives of or futures of luxury watch models. And today I have with me our data engineer, Vlad. So later he will go into details of the technical data specifications that we have on the Oracle. Thank you.
Thanks, Ari. And finally, we've got GeoDB and Alexander Chevtaev.
Hi, Will. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting. So my name is Alexander, as Will has presented me. I'm in charge of blockchain business in GeoDB, and GeoDB is a decentralized ecosystem for user-generated data exchange. So basically, very simply, what we do, we allow like any type of application to get connected to our network, and then all the data which is generated by users, we capture the data in an anonymous way, so we never touch names or emails. And we reward partially the application, but the most important is that we reward users as well. So basically, it's like the first time, where we're building like a pure, like peer-to-peer economy, because all of us are generating, like tons of data. These are very simple, like questions that we get from our applications, like, are you okay that, you share this or that kind of data? In fact, very often, like, those applications either monetize the data afterwards, or they would be willing to, but they don't also, like, they're not that, like professionals, they don't know how to do it on the data market. So we solve like those inefficiencies. And speaking of the type of data we're generating right now, like the first very simple use case is geocache. We just launched it for our tech, like testing purposes, where we capture location data and give users, even like test tokens it was. And it went like so viral. Now we have, like more than 250,000 downloads. So it just proves, like this model, and people are really, like willing to participate in these kind of things. And but currently we are capturing more type of data. For example, consumers data. You can take, like pictures of your retail, like receipts, and that data in the auction world is using by market intelligence. That data is used by market intelligence companies, basically retail, like producers. So that's briefly about us, and I'm happy to follow the conversation about the scenarios we're now looking into on-chain use of data.
Great, thanks, Alexander. So that's the panel. We've already started talking a bit about why each of these companies have wanted to get their data on chain and have worked with Chainlink to do that. So why don't I go back to each of you, and could you tell me specifically what data you've enabled on your Chainlink Oracle? And I think it would be helpful then, as people think about the on-chain use cases, for them to understand what the typical off-chain use cases are for that data today. If there are any. If you're someone who doesn't have that, we can talk about that too. Why don't we start with Tiingo? Why don't you tell us a bit about the end-of-day products and how end-of-day is used in the off-chain world?
Oh, you muted, my friend. Oh, Rishi, you're muted. Yep, there you go. Oh, he's got it.
All right, thanks, Patrick. I appreciate it. Yeah, so the end-of-day data Oracle is a way to obtain end-of-day equity prices on-chain. And right now, the way people, by the way, equity being, Apple stock prices, Tesla stock prices, OTC, Nintendo, ETFs, the ARK ETFs, Buzz, you name it. And the current way people use this data is to, there are two sort of camps. One are app developers who want to help people with price discovery and value discovery. So how do you find undervalued assets? How do you find expensive assets? And how do you make money off of it? And so we have a number of apps who do this and display the data to their end users. And the other side is we have a lot of algorithmic traders as clients, both at the fund institutional level and also at the individual level. So if you're trying to systematize a trading model, that's another use case that people bring in the data for. And a third use case is also validation of data. So a huge problem in the institutional world, and something that every major hedge fund has, is they have their own data cleaning teams and data cleaning arms. And it's an incredibly inefficient process because every fund has it. And the question is why isn't the data just better from the beginning? And the problem is when you have centralized sort of authorities, like in the equity space, weird things can happen. Tickers can change, mergers and acquisitions. For example, what happened with Google is they launched a new share class. And so you had Goog, G-O-O-G, change their ticker to Google with an L, G-O-O-G-L, then issue a new share with G-O-O-G. So if you don't track these things carefully, share classes and everything can get all mixed up. And actually very few companies handle that Google transition correctly. And when you have starting these mergers and acquisitions and centralized authorities where tickers can change, names can change, exchanges can change, it becomes a really, really difficult problem. So Tiingo took a different approach. Coming from the hedge fund world, instead of every hedge fund having to have their own data cleaning arm, what if we could do that side of it? And so we have a pretty extensive operation that looks and cleans this data and then reports it. Now, any good developer knows trust but verify. So in the validation side of the business, people trust us, but they also validate us with multiple people to ensure everything goes right. For example, let's just say our data center, I don't know, gets hit by lightning and all the backups go away. And then it takes an hour to set up a DNR site or something like that. By having multiple people and bringing Tiingo in, it creates a more trusted environment for price data and validation of data. So that's kind of the current use cases. And when we get to it, I have a lot of fun on-chain ideas, but I'll stop here.
That's great. Just one other use case I was wondering if you could highlight is fund portfolio rebalancing using end-of-day data. I know that's like a particularly good current use case of end-of-day, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you buy an ETF or a mutual fund, especially from December 2000 or from, I should say, March of last year, when we saw a massive increase in a lot of equities, let's say your portfolio says you need to be 5% exposed to Tesla, but Tesla just ripped 10%. And now your portfolio has 8% exposure, or it ripped like, I don't know, it doubled or whatever it was, whatever Tesla's doing at any given moment. And now your portfolio exposure went from 5% to 8%. So if you're a large fund or a mutual fund or an ETF, you need to rebalance your portfolio to bring your Tesla exposure back to 5%. So end of day data is now, people sometimes think end of day closing data is similar to crypto, in that the closing value is what happens, in equity markets, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when US equity markets close. So a lot of people think the closing price is the value right at 4 p.m. And that's not actually true. There's a type of order called a market on close order. And the opening and closing prices are actually auctions. They're auctions, and that's how the end of price is determined. So, some days, especially end of quarter as we approach it, you may see the price at 4 p.m. $100 a share, yet somehow it closed $102 a share. And you're like, where did that 2% spike happen? It's because there was an imbalance in a closing price. And those closing auction values are what funds and both hedge funds and mutual funds and ETFs are all anchored on. So they all take part in that market on close order. And also it's great from a backtesting standpoint, because when you're building a systematic strategy, you can actually use market on close orders to make sure you minimize your tracking error. So it's kind of getting into the nuance there a little bit about orders, but yeah, it's absolutely critical in portfolio rebalancing, because that's what your investors, shareholders are all going to benchmark you across, is the end of day closing price.
Awesome, thanks. Greg, you talked a little bit about the fact that you're providing skew on your Oracle. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more what skew and implied volatility are in the options world and how that information is used typically by options traders.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are really good questions. So for those of you who are not new to options, something to kind of keep in mind is that there's a lot of different instruments you can choose from when you're trading options. So there's a lot of different expirations. There's a lot of different strike prices. You can buy puts or you can buy calls. Calls are betting on the underlying going up. Puts are betting on the underlying going down. You could kind of think of options as insurance policies. And so one way to sort of normalize prices in a way that's comparable between all the different instruments is to look at implied volatility, because you couldn't compare, call it an option that costs 400 that expires in 2 weeks directly to an option that costs $800 that expires in 3 weeks. There's a mismatch in time duration. And so if you look at implied volatility, it just normalizes for all the variables. And you could say, you can concretely say implied volatility of 70 is cheaper than implied volatility of 80, adjusting for everything else. So when you're looking at the options market, there's a bunch of different ways to look at it. And one of the simplest ways to get an idea of sentiment of option positioning in the market is to look at skew. And so what skew does, it looks at two equidistant options, and we do equidistance in terms of delta, but you can just kind of think of it for now, they're equidistant options. One's on the put side and one's on the call side. And you're looking at the implied volatility of these two options for identical expirations. And so if the puts are more expensive in terms of volatility than the call side, then the market has a bearish positioning or a bearish sentiment on the underlying price, and they're willing to pay more for the put option pricing. If you have a positive skew, in our case, calls are more expensive, and there's a sort of a bullish sentiment sort of on the price of the underlying. Now, you can kind of there's a lot of different ways to think about this. You could think of it in bullish sentiment in terms of price, or you could think of it as if the price goes up, it's going to go up with more volatility and velocity than if the price goes down. So you can kind of think of it the two different ways, but in terms of expected value, long story short, positive skew, market positioning is bullish, negative skew, market positioning is bearish. So this is a great way to just get a quick glance of the positioning of the derivatives market when you're doing other strategies that encompass maybe just the underlying stuff like that.
Awesome, thank you. I hope there's some options experts out there, because I think the whole options analytics space on chain is going to be really interesting. Gavin, you talked a bit about the use cases today for your sports data. Your Oracle service currently is providing total score. Maybe just talk to us a bit about how total score is used today in betting markets as an example of how it might get used on chain.
Yeah, so I guess simply, so betting on a total score means you place a bet on whether the total score will be under or over a certain number of points. So in basketball, it might be under and over 200 or 200.5. If the score is 210, then you bet over 200.5, then your bet wins. If it's under 200.5, then your bet loses. That's it's one of a number of markets. The main three markets in betting would be the money line, so which team is going to win, the spread, which is it's a handicap where a team is given a notional point head start, and the total score. Those are the three, at least in the US, those are the three main betting markets. Yeah, I'm not sure what.
No, that's great. And then tell us also what sport events and leagues are covered under your Oracle today.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment we have the major US facing sports. So the four professional US leagues, the NBA basketball, NFL, American football, NHL, ice hockey, MLB, baseball, along with the college basketball and football. We also have mixed martial arts, as well as soccer. So the MLS, soccer. Now, all six of those leagues have a total. The first four are fairly obvious. The total number of points in basketball or American football, goals in ice hockey, runs in baseball, as well as soccer, total number of goals. But actually, the total for MMA is the total number of rounds that the fight lasts for. They attempt to invent as many markets that people are familiar with and kind of shoehorn them into a particular sport. So in this case, you'll be betting on whether the fight lasts more than a round and a half or less than a round and a half.
Got it. Great. Thanks. I'm looking forward to talking about some of those betting market use cases for on-chain. Ari, for Watchsignals, you're providing secondary market pricing information. Can you tell us a little bit more about that data? And is that data that you're providing used off-chain today? And if so, how are people using it?
Yes. for luxury watch market, there are two sides of the market: the new market and then the secondary or the pre-owned market. And there is a lot of trading activities within the pre-owned market. And so for like certain model, if you understand the market and you buy at the right time, like you can make 10x or for watch model within 1 year. And so this is the reason why there are a lot of watch traders now coming to the market. And now we see this opportunity that people are opening fund and investing in luxury watches as an investment asset, and providing data for those solution and products are very interesting for us. And for now, our data on the Oracle includes historical price data. So you can, we have now more than 2 million data points of more than 40,000 luxury watch models. And for each watch models, we also have identifier and specification, and this data you can use to identify to authenticate watches. And for example, if you are having products, a blockchain app data tracking and authenticate watches, and write it on blockchain for authentic, and then you can use our watch model identifiers to do this. And then for NFT, so rare models like are becoming like insanely in demand and very expensive to own for one individual. So like the use case could be we tokenize this really rare model. It could be very expensive, 21 million for one watch model. It is possible. So this could be a product that could be tokenized, and everyone could own a piece of it and start trading on it. And the next thing you can use is for collateral in DeFi. So for example, so if our data will allow users to access a loan, and this loan will need appraisal data from certain watch models. And our data could help your blockchain apps to appraise the watch more precisely based on the market value at a certain time. And next thing is about synthetic assets. So for example, we are going to have a new watch model which is going to be released in the market and at a very limited supply. And so for watch lovers, so they could start to bet on futures of these products. So and so that's the general use case. If you have more question about the technical data, I could invite Flat. He is joining us today to talk more about our technical data.
Sure. Why don't we, I'm going to turn over to Patrick after we get through GeoDB. And when Patrick is going to talk a little bit more about use cases, maybe we get Vlad on to talk about the specific data. But why don't we get Alexander? Tell us a bit more specifically about the data you've enabled on Chainlink via your Oracle service, and how that kind of data is used today, not necessarily for a blockchain use case, but for retail or for other applications?
Well, as I mentioned, the most, the largest volumes of data we have generated so far are related to location. And, basically static data about your mobile. What is your mobile device? What's the operation system? And also some dynamic data such as, signal level, battery level. So this kind of thing. So basically, usually, as I mentioned before, this kind of data in the off-chain world is used, by various, market intelligence companies who tend to analyze, users' behavior. So basically, people behavior, how people move, how people consume, and then share this data with different, whatever you can only imagine type of companies, mostly those who do, retail, traditional retail business. And that is also the type of data which we shared with Chainlink to our Chainlink node. Because I also mentioned another use case where you can capture the pictures of the of your receipts, and they're being recognized, and also data can be structured. So this is the use case that we haven't integrated to Chainlink yet. But the idea is that we actually, in our case, we hope and we see that it's not really about how is strictly the data can be used off-chain or on-chain, because what you can do is that imagine that I am some kind of this off-chain data consumer, a market intelligence company, so I have some further agreements with other data consumers, and in fact what could be done is that once those processes which those companies have can be more automated and decentralized, and because basically those processes you can also apply smart contracts for them, and for those kind of smart contracts you need to feed them obviously with the data. So initially actually I would like to give a very good feedback on the Chainlink team, because when we had the initial discussion, it was more about guys, so it was they say we see you have the data. And we started to brainstorm, and the Chainlink team could, very good suggestions, and they had a very good vision, and understanding, how the oracles, data consumption market works. So one of the initial, use cases we're thinking about is to approach the insurance companies, because the insurance companies, especially those who insure, the devices. To understand, how they get information about, the data, and whether they, experimenting now with some smart contracts, because that in insurance, blockchain is a very cool use case, because you can automate the compliance process, which is, usually very long, bureaucratic, and this is one of the things that they would like to deal with. While here it can be, the smart contracts reads information, for example, when the mobile, stopped operating at which place. So, and if it matches, with some kind of parameters that the client, applied, or it can, the application even can be, automatic for some kind of refund. So that'll be justification of, certain things that happened with the mobile device. So this is one, I think it's a very great use case. And of course, guys, we're now open, as I said, technically we're absolutely agnostic. We're now exploring health data, from this kind of, apps and devices where you run and do those kind of things. And in general, that now the world is completely changing, and there is a lot of also, demand on the, kind of research level. And we hope that again, that whether how to apply some results of the research, and this research should get data from these more automatic or reliable sources. And also it's very important, because in this case, once you automate the whole process, you can get data in real time. So we hope that basically in this kind of studies, we also will see more applications of of decentralized apps. And we see that for sure, this is, where our data generation and Chainlink fit very well.
So let's focus a little bit on what's available to the hackathon participants today. And I think what's on your Oracle service now is you can input a query that says for a specific geolocation, a specific distance from that point, and then a certain time frame, you can deliver how many phones, I guess, are in that area or went through that area. I know one of the potential use cases would be like for a retail store looking at foot traffic. Maybe you could just talk about that data set a little bit, because I think that's what's available to the hackathon builders today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, technically, it's very brief, like that now the Chainlink node is connected to, like through API to the whole, real-time data storage that GeoDB manages. And yes, of course, like one of the most obvious, like use cases for geolocation is that for traditional retail business, like, okay, I want to open a coffee shop and I want to know the traffic. So you can basically put some, like kind of like filters. What is the time? Like the time frame, because maybe I want to have a morning coffee shop. What is the time frame? Certain, like area. And yes, and as Will said, like to understand what are the because in our case user is a device, what kind of like devices are there, not what kind, but how many devices are there. So you can create such kind of this called heat maps to see the activity where, for example, imagine the business case, I'm thinking of opening a retail store or coffee shop, and I'm thinking of several locations where I found several options. I could very easily build real-time heat map and see, okay, how is it going? While real time is so important, because if I go to traditional data market, I say, okay, guys, this is the data like 2 months past, like 3 months past. And, like in today's crazy world, I mean, something which was like 3 months ago could be like absolutely different reality from what we have right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Patrick, I would love to turn it over to you now. I'd love for you to maybe explore a bit with each of the different data providers, some of the use cases either that they've already talked about or maybe didn't mention that we think could be an interesting way for their data to be used on chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a great way, it sounds like a lot of you actually understand, a lot of the different use cases that some of these hackers can and probably should be doing, right? Because having more diverse data means you can do more things, right? We're reaching a point in society where data is very quickly and very, very easily becoming the most sought after like commodity, if you will, right? Having good, solid quality data that is clean, right? And that requires a little bit less work to get it right, right? And I was actually 100% following along with Rishi, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. When he was talking about how like so many hedge funds spend so long just cleaning the data, right? Like whenever I was talking to research engineers, they would say, yeah, like I spend like 60% of my day just cleaning the data, trying to get good data. And that's a nightmare. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to spend that much time. So having all these data providers saying, hey, here it is, here you go, is fantastic. So, and I know a lot of you guys already talked about some of the use cases, but I think that there's so many more things that we can do with this stuff too. So for those of you who went to the NFT code along session where we built an NFT real time. That's obviously a really hot thing that's going on right now, is having a chance to give artists like the pay and what they deserve, right? Having a way to cryptographically track royalties and everything. Something like getting watch prices, right? You could have an NFT which is tracking the watch prices, or which has like some type of like a really cool watch on the NFT, or maybe the NFT is a watch and it tracks the time or something like that. When you have this data for part of your NFT, this is something that's unlocked there. Or you can even create some type of financial instrument. I mean, and all this data can be easily put into some type of prediction market, right? Hey, like I predict that watch prices are gonna shoot to the moon. I predict that this location is gonna get this type of foot traffic, or this much foot traffic, or for cryptocurrency volatility. Hey, I bet you that the sentiment of the market is going to be this in this at this time, and we're going to track the sentiment by using the options, the cryptocurrency, the Genesis Volatility Cryptocurrency Options Oracle. There's a little bit of mathematical knowledge there that I'm lacking when we're talking about the 30-day constant maturity, the delta skew. That's where I'm like, okay, that sentiment, sure, got it. Okay, that makes sense. But we could track the sentiment. We could put that into a prediction market. So prediction markets or any of these type of financial instruments where we say, hey, at this time, this data is going to be this. That's like the easiest and the easiest layup. So if you're a hacker and you're here and you're looking for a layup, boom, that's right there. Hey, I bet you the sports game is going to be 10-2 on this day. Great. We're going to use this. We're going to use the rundown for that. Awesome. Hey, I bet you this location is going to get this much foot traffic. But even more than that, we can put all this into NFTs. So we can create these dynamic NFTs where their attributes actually change along with the data, right? So maybe you have like a keeper, for example. I know that we just launched Keeper. Definitely go check that in the documentation. We have a keeper that is calling check update, right? And maybe it only calls check to update, at the end of the day or something like that, right? And at the end of the day, if the end of the day stock price, right, or if the watch prices, or if the sports game turnout is X, your NFT maybe will power up their sword, right, or power up their weapon, or do something crazy, right, with their NFT in the gaming world. Or really, the potential is limitless, right? Having all this diverse data means that we can have even more diverse and more complex and more interesting smart contracts. So we have this wonderful panel here from different data providers who are each basically unlocking a new piece of functionality. And I know they even talked a little bit about what they currently do in the traditional world, right? All those traditional contracts, all those traditional applications and agreements can be built on blockchain and are being built on blockchain. So for example, stock exchanges, right? Getting that end-of-day data, obviously really important. We see those in the blockchain world, but we also see something else that we can do in the blockchain world. We can also do this thing called flash loans, right? You can't do that in the real world. So we can do everything that we can do in the real world with this data. So every use case that they mentioned in the traditional world, we can do that in a decentralized fashion. Plus, we can add this extra piece of, okay, well, since it's math-based instead of contract-based, we can do other crazy stuff, like maybe like a flash loan, like maybe a flash loan on watch prices, or a flash loan based off of like a certain location excuse me, I don't think foot traffic is actually right. I think it actually returns users in that radius. Excuse me, geocaching users. I guess that's almost foot traffic, but these different users in an area, or maybe like, hey, this is the most viewed spot, or this spot's really hot right now. Maybe you should avoid it for your vacation, and have your smart contract spit out like an automated location for your vacation or something like that. In any case, having all this diverse data and having these streams of data come from these different places, it means we can take everything that we've done before, add it to blockchain, and then do even more. So really excited that we have all the data providers that we do here.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. We've got about 12 minutes left. I think we're going to try to see if there's some questions we can get in from the YouTube, but why don't we quickly go through our panelists? I know, Rishi, you said you had some use cases you wanted to discuss. If there's anything we haven't hit on or that you wanted to highlight, let's give you that opportunity right now, starting with Rishi.
Yeah, so I mean, real quickly, the whole reason I'm really interested in blockchain and Tiingo data and bringing it on chain is like at my heart, I'm a total hippie, and I just don't like what the financial industry has neglected in a lot of people, or in banking the unbanked. I think is probably my something dear to me. But on that note, I like the idea of incentivizing people's behavior and also providing transparency, and those are two things I've been thinking about a lot. And had I have more time, I'd probably start this project. But one on-chain use case I was thinking is helping fix something that's really broken right now in the equity world, and that's ESG investing. Now, ESG tries to invest in companies that do some sort of societal benefit to this world. but it's incredibly broken because if you look what's in an ESG fund, Tesla's there. That makes sense. Facebook is there. That's where it makes a little bit less sense. Then you have Coca-Cola and Pepsi. You have people selling 44 grams of sugar in a drink, and that's considered providing societal good, right? And how do you fix it, right? And the reality is just like people, companies are complicated, you know? And what if, and this is just like me throwing it out there, it's kind of a big project. What if you could help incentivize different behavior by rather than breaking ESG into multiple facets? Like right now we have carbon credits. What if you could create a token that gets issued to people on holding different things? For example, Tesla might give you a carbon credit equivalent in some sort of tokenized fashion. Whereas owning Comcast, it might not win you any benefits in certain levels, but providing connectivity to the world, that gives you a tokenized benefit. And then being able to organize those tokens into projects you agree with that help sort of fix some of these behaviors, similar to how carbon credits work. That to me would be wicked cool and sort of help augment an issue that we're having right now and what is ESG and it being too narrowly focused, and instead be able to break that out and reward people based on what sort of societal benefit each company provides, and incentivizing company behavior to be more in line. And the other idea, which is a little bit more already pretty much there, is something similar to synthetics and probably working off that, which I believe is part of the Chainlink Hackathon too. But in the last week, we saw a $50 billion fund essentially blow up. And the problem with that is we had no idea how much leverage is in the system when people do things like swaps. And when I was a trader, I couldn't trade Swiss equity futures. So it was either Goldman or UBS said, why don't we enter into a swap, where basically you get the exposure, but you don't have to own the underlying asset. Now, people's retail margin debt, like all of our margin debt, is reported to a government entity essentially, and then it's reported. Swap debt is not. And so we have a lot of leverage in this system that we don't know that poses systemic risk. And this is where blockchain, I think, can come in really handy, in that it can provide transparency by creating a method where banks can write this on chain and show in real time what the actual underlying risk is of financial markets, of how much leverage is in the system, while also anonymizing it so it's not tied to any sort of fund. For example, that way people don't try to make a run on Bridgewater or some other large fund. So those are two really use cases I think could be done right now. The first one probably be a proof of concept, but the second one I'm sure could be built off synthetics. And those, I hope those are, I think they both would actually provide a lot of societal benefit.
Really cool, thanks. We actually have a couple of questions in. They're both for Alexander and GeoDB. So why don't we jump there? And Alex, if there's other use cases you wanted to highlight, you can also do that in a couple minutes while answering those questions. So the questions are, where would the device data be retrieved from? Does it come from the service providers? And then the second question is, would the service you provide be intrusive for privacy? For example, would it be like selling data to Google for advertisements except location?
Okay, let me go one by one. Okay, so with the first one, there are like several things. So the first one is the data which users allow, and also we also with the allowance of the application. So I don't know, imagine I'm using some I don't know, like some TripAdvisor stuff, or like, you know, like some travel applications or some sports applications I run, for example. And then I say, okay, I'm fine to share my anonymous data of how I run, and maybe, you know, like some healthcare data as well, and then get rewarded in exchange for that, geo tokens. So this is the first type of data, how it's done. So it's basically like it's streamed through the application directly, so the data is generated on the side of the application. Then I guess that's what you guys mean, that I also mentioned some kind of like mobile data. Well, that is streamed directly from your device. So you as a user, you say, okay, like if that app is getting the type of data, again, this is all streaming from the application, but this application is also taking it from your device, because your device through the operation system constantly delivers that kind of data. But in our case, like, I mean, the apps are connected through SDK to GeoDB, and then that's how we get the data. And it's like very transparent. Basically, the block is created, the data gets there, data is classified, because for different type of data, for different volumes of data, there is different reward. Okay, once data is delivered, the reward immediately comes out. And the second question, Will, can you repeat it, please? It was something about Google.
Yeah, it was about, would the service be intrusive for privacy? For example, would it be like selling data to Google for advertisements except location data?
I'm not sure I understand the question correctly. If it's like about the privacy and whether we have like privacy concerns, etc. Well, the things like, so far we're not even exploring the ways of, like dealing with private data, even with your permission. So what we're doing so far is we just capturing, and that is very clear for the app on the SDK level. So they see what kind of data we stream. We capture only behavioral data, or some, like static data. So we might know the user ID. What we're introducing right now is that for example, we say, okay, guys, for extra reward, you can tell us your like gender, age. But again, like we don't, according to GDPR, we shouldn't, like we shouldn't make the data be recognized that it is you. So we don't do that. And then I didn't get very clear what's about Google, but basically that. So we collect behavioral data, and in fact, if you take a look at, and we know this because we did this kind of like negotiations, and now doing some early deals, that if you go to data consumers, like those companies. I mean, for example, about the tickets I told you, like imagine I'm Procter & Gamble, so I'm producing like shampoos like Head and Shoulders. The problem I have is that once I deliver those shampoos to, let's say, like a Carrefour, which is like huge, like retail, like network of supermarkets, I lose the track of, like who's my consumer. I know that I have delivered it, like to Carrefour, and that's it. So I don't know who are those guys, who are consuming my, like my Head and Shoulders, the shampoo that I produce. And that's, like while you're able to connect the portfolio of the user and recognize that, okay, this guy purchased, like my shampoo, and you manage to deliver that data, back to those guys, to the producers, it's very valuable for them because they better understand their client. They know, how to position their marketing and so on and so on. So this is type of things where we're doing and we're working on.
Great, thanks. And so your data is anonymized, so it's not, you can't tell the individual person, and it's, for those that are familiar with GDPR, which is the EU law about data privacy, you guys are GDPR compliant, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Great. So we're nearly out of time. Let me just throw it out to the panelists. Greg, Ari, or Gavin, any last thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I can. Sorry.
Ahead. Nothing on my side. Go ahead.
Yeah, just I mean, the I don't know if people are familiar with sports betting, but it's being essentially deregulated in the US, which is an enormous opportunity for startups, for innovative companies looking to introduce products. And there's a lot of blockchain products being developed and being launched right now. I think what would be useful would be to remove the bookmakers completely from the equation, if that's possible in some way. Bookmakers are the ones who essentially help people to lose by taking a margin on the prices that they offer. So to create something that connects the people together, one person wants to place a bet against another person without commission, without the enormous workload, and an automation of grading via services such as our own would, I think, probably give sports betting a slightly better name. I appreciate that there are the negative aspects of it, but a lot of that is because of the fact that bookmakers take a lot of our money, or the gamblers' money. So yeah, this new wave is certainly going to help with that.
Great, thanks, Gavin. Ari or Vlad, anything from your side in 1 minute?
Vlad, is there anything to add?
Vlad, you're on mute if you're talking.
Hello, Vlad.
Yeah, sorry, had a bad connection. So yeah, if you're talking about the thoughts, so most of all, about our project, we can provide complete information about where watches was available, for what price and for how long. So this is like the main precious information that could be given to the participants of the hackathon.
Great, thanks. All right, well, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for joining today from the hackathon community. I'd like to thank all of our panelists. Thank you so much for your time and for being part of the Chainlink ecosystem. And also thank you to Keenan and to Patrick and the rest of the Chainlink team who helped pull this together. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the Chainlink YouTube channel. And good luck, hackers. I can't wait to see your projects.
Good luck, everyone.
Everybody.